Well, there are two very different movies for you to consider this weekend, and our film reviewer, Jason Gorber, here to tell us more about Hard Truths and Universal Language. Jason, good day to you.
Good morning to you, sir.
These are very different movies, just by those plot summaries I've given.
Sure. Movies are great, aren't they? You can see all kinds of different flavors, different contexts. Hard Truths is a Mike Leigh film. It premiered at Toronto, and it was deserving. Everybody's talking about deserving and what needed to get Oscar attention. We'll talk about that in a bit. But Hard Truths from a master filmmaker, British filmmaker, Mike Leigh, who does these exquisite portrayals of life in Britain. And he does, they're so precise and so beautiful in the way that they're constructed. They are, for me, the great notion of what you get, something that's sort of theatrical, something you'd see as a play, but without any of the trappings when those are translated to film. It absolutely cinematic. There's beautiful photography that's not showy, and these incredible performances that he elicits. And one way he does that is with weeks, if not months, of rehearsals with his sort of ensemble that he actually creates. And this one is not the easiest to accommodate at first, thanks in part to the central character Pansy, played by Marianne Jean-Baptiste, has long worked with him. Her previous roles, she's been very effusive and very energetic and very positive. And this is one of those family dramas where there's just somebody who's just miserable.
Okay, so I've got to pick up on the miserable part, because I'll tell you, like, when I go and see a film, I lean in on comedies, and it's maybe been my personality, but also I just think I need an antidote to a heavy world. So what's the case for going and seeing a movie about a miserable person?
Because you're seeing how the people around the miserable person are coping, and sometimes there's sort of joy, schadenfreude, I guess it is, or watching someone else be miserable. But more than that, honestly, as somebody who actually really, really is that movie guy, there's something incredibly nourishing about seeing something that's so eminently truthful. And so the way this is done, this is not misery for the sake of misery. You're seeing somebody struggling. You're seeing somebody do this. And so, yes, it is not the most uplifting. This is not a film to watch while you're on your phone. This is a film to be fully engaged with. This is a film to be treated as a form of sort of casual literature. This really, truly is an extraordinary film, one of the best of the year. It premiered at TIFF. This is one of the coups that it got. It got actually skipped over a bunch of other festivals that probably should have highlighted it. So in a funny way, even though it's from this masterful filmmaker that has, won top prizes at Cannes and had all of his celebration before, Academy Award nomination before, this is one that's quietly gone because the subject matter is a little dour and a little dark, tracing this collision between the black families. But I believe for those that actually will take a chance on this film, they're going to be incredibly moved by it, be uplifted by the moments of levity, by the tiny moments of joy that you actually get among this, the recognition that sometimes people in our lives act this way, and the unabashed truth of it all makes this film absolutely one. I'm not asking for people to do homework. This isn't like you're having to eat your green vegetables, and Lord knows anybody who's actually seen me walking around knows I do not do that enough. But yet there's something incredibly nourishing about a film like this, both aesthetically and emotionally. And it's worth definitely thinking of it not as something that's escapist, but something to escape into. I think that is absolutely extraordinary.
Okay, you're doing a good sell job. That's Hard Truths. I want to turn to Universal Language, because turkeys in Winnipeg, what's the connection here?
So Matthew Rankin did a film called 20th Century, which actually I'd love you to see. It's not my favorite, but it's a completely bent version of the history of our earliest prime ministers, living on ice floes, and sort of something like Nosferatu, but with Canadian politicians. And so I was sort of slightly hesitant about his new film that was set to play Cannes way back in May and is now coming out in theaters. And the only way I can describe this is picture the whimsy of Wes Anderson and the weirdness of Winnipeg.
You're talking to a guy from Winnipeg, to be clear here.
And to be clear, I believe the entire film comes down with the pun that in Tehran, in Iran, the currency is the rial.
Yes.
And of course, Louis Riel. And the currency in this vision of Winnipeg is the rial, with Louis Riel on it. And they speak in Persian or Farsi. And it's it's a man who leaves the bureaucratic nightmare, the hellscape, the Orwellian dystopia of Quebec, and goes to a Winnipeg where the Tehran-style coffee shop where people are sipping well-brewed coffee is the Tim Hortons with the text written in Arabic script. It is so exquisitely weird and twisted. Wild turkeys roam. Children are looking for their broken glasses. I'm describing it as this insane sort of vision, but at its heart, I think this truly is one of the great paeans, one of the great poems to multiculturalism in our country, both the ridiculousness of the promise and how exquisite that you can take an absolute other part of our fundamental culture and put it within the notion of Winnipeg. And Winnipeg has birthed not only our illustrious hosts, but has birthed these amazing filmmakers.
I wondered who you were talking about when you said illustrious host, but yeah, okay.
I'll
I
point
get
to
it.
you.
Yeah.
Why not? The guy behind you.
Yeah.
But people like Guy Madden, who has for decades now actually shown out, as I described, the weirdness of Winnipeg and just this strange, surreal beauty of this sort of middle of the prairie city. This vision of Winnipeg is so extraordinarily detailed and local. I would adore you to see this film.
If it's Winnipeg, I will. Yes.
And more importantly, I would adore people to actually celebrate. This was Canada's Oscar contender for Best International Picture. It didn't make it up the final ladder. But Matthew Rankin and his collaborators are so exquisitely attuned to this bizarre and funny and witty and silly and gorgeously framed vision about the banality of Winnipeg and the beauty of that banality.
You mentioned the Oscars. I've only got a very short period of time with you left, but the movies that made it in and the snubs, what do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, like my rule always about awards shows that they're all really terrible unless something wins that you really loved and then you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I will always say this every year, look at the documentary list. You got 5 films there that you may not have seen. So in terms of all the big splashy stuff, I actually really like Amelia Perez. I actually really didn't like Challengers. So all of that drama and discourse that's been going on for the last 24 hours is fine. I'm totally fine Wicked getting the attention it's getting. And I believe I'll go on a limb here and suggest as much as I would love something like Anora to win, I think what's going to happen is because it's a ranked ballot, everybody's going to think that their third favorite film is going to win. And that's probably going to be Conclave. And the fact that that's kind of the plot of Conclave, that we just kind of get the person. We can't have our first choice or our second choice. So the third choice ends up winning. At this time where we're worried about how elections actually work, that's where I'm going to go on a limb. I will simply say the Oscars, as ridiculous and preposterous and insane as they are an opportunity for us to actually talk about our love of film. And that's never a bad thing, even if the argument sometimes, the discourse is a little bit rich. Let's just put it that way.
Jason Gorber, lovely chat as always. Thanks very much.
All the best, my friend.
That is Jason Gorber, Metro Morning's movie columnist and the editor-in-chief of ThatShelf.com.
ThatShelf.